When you think about medieval food, what's the first image that pops into your head? Is it a peasant, covered in mud, hunched over a bowl of flavorless gruel? And then, do you picture a king in a grand castle just feasting on an entire roasted pig? Well, what if I told you that whole picture, the one we all have in our minds, is almost completely wrong? The truth is so much more surprising, and honestly, in some ways, it's a lot darker than you might think.
So let's ask the big question right up front. Was the medieval diet really just mud and gruel? The answer, it turns out, isn't just about food. Nope. It opens up this hidden world of ironclad rules, of desperate survival, and yeah, some truly bizarre royal banquets.
All right, first things first, we have to tackle the biggest misconception of all, the gruel myth. We've all been led to believe that for centuries, most people just ate this grim, monotonous slop. And look, that's one of the most stubborn stereotypes about the era, but the reality, it was actually much more flavorful. For starters, you'd probably be shocked by how much meat they actually ate. See, most peasant families kept animals, and pigs were a huge favorite, mostly because they were super low maintenance and could pretty much find their own food. Then, right before a harsh winter set in, any animal that was too old or too expensive to feed through the cold months, it was slaughtered. That meat was then smoked or salted down, giving them this crucial source of protein to survive. Now, the absolute cornerstone of the medieval diet, and I mean for everyone, from the poorest farmer to the king himself, was a dish called pottage. The best way to think of it is like a perpetual stew. You'd have a big pot over the fire, and every day you'd throw in vegetables, grains, herbs, whatever bits of bacon or meat you had, and just let it simmer for hours. Sure, a noble's pottage would be thick and loaded with meat, while a peasant's might be a bit thinner, but it was the meal of the day. You know what really showed off your status? It was your bread. Seriously, in the medieval world, the color of your bread told everybody exactly where you stood in society. Peasants ate these dark, heavy loaves made from cheap grains like rye and barley. And if times were tough, they'd even mix in ground-up peas or acorns. But the nobility, oh no. They ate fine, fluffy white bread. It took a lot of time and money to produce, which made it the ultimate status symbol. So you might be thinking, okay, if peasants had their own pigs, grew vegetables, and had grain, what was actually stopping them from eating pretty well? Well, it turns out it wasn't just about money. There were these incredibly powerful forces controlling exactly what could, and more importantly, could not end up on your plate. And this is where the story takes a really dark turn. The forests were just teeming with game. We're talking deer, wild boar, all kinds of birds. It sounds like a paradise of free food, right? Wrong. Every single one of those forests belonged to the nobles and the king. And for a peasant to hunt in there, well, that was a crime called poaching, and the punishments were absolutely brutal. Just let that sink in for a second. This wasn't some small fine or a slap on the wrist. If you were a peasant and you got caught hunting the king's deer simply to feed your starving family, the penalty was execution. The law literally valued a nobleman's hobby more than a common person's life. I mean, what would you even do in that situation? But believe it or not, there was a power even greater than the king that controlled what everyone ate, and that was the Catholic Church. Its laws didn't just govern how you prayed, they governed what you ate and when you were allowed to eat it. For absolutely everyone, from the lowest peasant to the highest lord, the church's calendar was the ultimate kitchen boss. Just take a look at a typical week. The church declared Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday to be fast days. What did that mean? It meant that for nearly half the days of the entire year, eating meat was considered a sin. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a strict rule that shaped the diet of an entire continent. And if you thought that was tough, then came Lent. For 46 straight days before Easter, the rules got extreme. No meat, no dairy, no eggs. Now, for a peasant who's doing back-breaking physical labor out in the fields, this was a massive hardship. Their entire diet shrank to just salted fish, bread, and some vegetables. And they were only allowed one meal a day. How could anyone possibly survive on that? So with all these crazy restrictions, where in the world did people get their calories? A huge part of the answer is right here. Ale. Yeah, it sounds pretty shocking to us, but the average adult drank about a gallon of ale every single day. See, a lot of water sources were unsafe to drink, but the brewing process made ale safe. And even more importantly, it was this cheap, liquid source of calories and nutrients. Plus, let's be honest, it probably helped boost morale during what was a pretty short and difficult life. Okay, so while the common person is trying to survive on pottage and ale, the nobility, well, they weren't just eating. They were putting on a show. Their banquets had less to do with actually feeling full and more to do with these shocking displays of power and wealth, featuring some of the weirdest dishes you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, forget a simple roast chicken. We are talking about pure theater. Roasted swans and peacocks that were cooked and then carefully redressed in their own feathers so they'd look alive on the dinner table. They ate hedgehogs baked into a pastry crust. They ate hundreds of rabbits in a single sitting. And then there were the lampreys, this hideous, parasitic, jawless fish that was considered the height of gourmet food. And these delicacies, they could be downright deadly. This quote from an old chronicle tells us that King Henry I of England actually died from eating too many lampreys after his doctors specifically told him not to. It's kind of a fitting, if not a little gruesome, end for a king who lived a life of such incredible excess. So as you can see, the story of medieval food is so much more than just a simple tale of the rich versus the poor. It's this incredibly complex picture of what food was available, what was forbidden by the king's law, and what was forbidden by God's law. All right, let's just quickly recap the three biggest takeaways here. First, we totally busted the gruel myth. The common diet was way more varied than we thought. Second, we saw the tale of two plates, this enormous gap between a peasant's simple pottage and a noble's roasted swan. And third, maybe the most important point of all, is that the ultimate control over what people ate didn't come from money, it came from the incredible power of kings and the church. Which brings us to our final thought. From baked hedgehogs to deadly lampreys and even bread that people used as a plate, the medieval menu was just full of surprises. So I'll leave you with this one question. What is the most surprising, or maybe the weirdest medieval food you learned about today? I really want to know. Let me know in the comments below.